What's up, dudes? Max here, and I wanted to give you all some hands-on impressions of potentially one of the most anticipated characters for Street Fighter V, and it's AKUMA. I'm just recently back from the PlayStation experience where the character was first playable, along with a whole bunch of changes that all the top players were checking out for the recent characters going into Season 2, but I spent all my time with AKUMA, accompanied with this direct capture footage. I hope you guys like it, because I really wanted to talk about this character and how much fun I had with him. Right off the bat, I'd like to tell you I haven't had this much fun with a character in the Street Fighter V game, other than possibly Ken when he was first introduced back at Comic-Con 2015. Now let's talk about AKUMA and what has changed, because, my god, a lot has changed, including the fact that he is a freaking lion flower man. His hair is ridiculous to all ends, further cementing the fact that Street Fighter V is the epitome of weird hair, the fighting game. While I do agree with a lot of you, he does look kind of awkward in some specific shots, but in motion, he actually looks really damn cool, and I don't really have many issues with his hair, especially his character select profile. He looks crazy, and it kind of looks like the Dark Hado is taking control of him, giving him more of this beast-like appearance, while it still makes no damn sense because in Street Fighter 3, he doesn't look like this at all. Regardless, he has several alternate costumes that are in the game, as well as a nostalgia costume, which we're also going to be seeing for Ibuki and Alex, that do look really good, so if you do have an issue with him having a giant freaking mane completely around his head, the nostalgia costume for AKUMA looks awesome and potentially just as good as Tekken 7, which looks freaking amazing. AKUMA, you will feel my wrath. I'm happy to report that almost all the stuff I was requesting of AKUMA a bit earlier, where we made the top 5 things I would like to see AKUMA change or looking forward to the character, are almost completely fulfilled. The other cool thing about him is that the classic stuff you remember from older AKUMA does still kind of work mechanically in terms of his gameplay and combos. It's just that they added a whole bunch of other levels on top of him, making him feel like one of the more unique AKUMAs ever, while toning down certain things like fireballs that go full screen, as well as jumping fireball limited use. So let's go into that, his special moves. He does have the Shoryuken, the Fireball, the Hurricane Kick, the Demon Flip, and those moves act fairly similar to what they did before. The Demon Flip goes into a dive kick. If you leave it neutral, it goes into a sweeping Demon Kick. If you actually go to a grab, it does the Demon Flip grab, and if you press a punch, it does a punching attack in the air. I didn't get to mess around with it too much, but the EX version actually acts as a launcher of some kind, allowing you to follow up with a air fireball and do all types of crazy stuff, and it's a lot of fun. It was actually one of my favorite things about the character, because the Demon Flip has never ever really done this before, and it leads to some very unique looking combos and setups. This footage is from me first playing the characters, but I learned a lot more of how to use it and utilize certain things later on, so trust me, it gets a lot better than what you're looking at right here. However, the one thing that has changed with AKUMA in comparison to previous games is his speed. I'd actually put the walk speed and dashing speed of this AKUMA kind of more comparable to Oni in Street Fighter IV, which is interesting considering he has an extremely similar default pose to Oni as well, and some nice costume touches that make him really look like the character. His normals are somewhat similar to previous AKUMA versions, but more remind me of Oni in terms of how the normals actually come out, the speed of them, and how you eventually use them. He has this forward heavy punch like jumping chop, which has a huge amount of startup, isn't even on overhead, but does leave you at an advantage, which is kind of similar to what Oni does with the slap chop special move, making this version of AKUMA kind of an amalgamation of Street Fighter IV AKUMA, along with Oni from Street Fighter IV as well. And that's not to mention his supers. He did get his super back from Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. While it is a lot different, it's kind of like an explosion in front of him instead of a shockwave. It is pretty cool and it's easy to set up for combos. While in his V-Trigger, he actually gets access to the Raging Demon, which in my opinion is possibly the best looking Raging Demon to date. This guy looks like a goddamn nightmare that's killing you in the dark. And the next part, continuing from that, is his V-Skill and V-Trigger. The V-Skill is, I am so happy to report, something that AKUMA has not really done before since the very early versions of Street Fighter. AKUMA used to have this sort of counter move that was later dropped in several versions of AKUMA later on. The counter is essentially what he does now for his V-Skill, somewhat acting like a parry, but not really like a parry from Ryu, more like an absorb from Street Fighter 4 when you use a the focus attack. This time, if you hold down the V skill buttons, you can actually follow up with a punch or a kick, allowing you to do this sort of focus attack absorb into a follow-up button. The kick button goes for a launcher, which you can actually follow up with select moves, and it leads to some really cool looking stuff. Or you can do a punch, which is a hard knockdown, allowing you to go for a somewhat vortexy situation. But speaking of the vortex, his fireball is dramatically different. You cannot jump back and fireball with Akuma. It simply doesn't work. The only way you're going to get his air fireball to work is if you do a jump forward of some kind. The craziest part about his regular ground game fireball is his normal 3-hit fireball does go full screen, but his regular fireball has this really weird aspect to it where it sort of has an amount of hit points to it the more it travels. This thing starts off strong but has the distance of a classic Sakura fireball, but by the end of it, it doesn't actually knock down the opponent. If you hit someone very close with Akuma's regular fireball, they actually blow back and hit the ground and they're able to tech up, which is different than any fireball in this game unless it's an EX. I was told of some very unique situations where if you actually set up the fireball to hit the opponent instead of knocking down, you can do some pretty crazy focus canceling sort of V-skill things that are really unique to Akuma in this game, making Akuma's V-skill very offensive oriented and setting up for combos that you've really never seen from Akuma in other Street Fighter titles. The V-Trigger, as I hoped, is essentially a transformation V-Trigger, but limited in time. I thought it was going to be like Nikali, where once you get the transform, you are transformed. It is not that way. It does have a timer and a cooldown, but while you're in V-Trigger, so many properties change, especially his special moves, which are completely enhanced. The Shoryuken actually allows you to do a slap chop at the end, bringing them back down to the ground, which is potentially one of the most satisfying moves I've ever felt in a Street Fighter game. You get double fireballs in the air, and there's some small changes to other moves that I really didn't get a chance to mess around with. A lot's gonna change in V-Trigger with how you set things up and how combos are performed, and while, like I said, I didn't get to test out a lot of that stuff, there is a lot of possibility in there, so this thing could be even cooler than I think it is right now. You've been seeing it the entire time as well, but the stage looks really damn good. Kind of a combination of Akuma's stage in Street Fighter 4 with the 2 shrine statues in the back, as well as the classic Street Fighter Alpha 2 stage, which was the 2 characters sitting in a dark field at night. It's sort of a combination of the two, and I really like it. Overall, I can't say anything really bad about Akuma. There is some stuff that some players won't like, including his lack of speed, which is completely different than before, and the fact that his regular fireball doesn't travel full screen, but a lot of them just felt so unique and fun. I'm a huge fan of hybrid Shoto characters, which is essentially what Oni and Evil Ryu were back in Ultra Street Fighter 4, and they are some of the most fun characters ever in a Street Fighter game, in my personal opinion. This version of Akuma is able to take the things that made Akuma a lot of fun from previous games, as well as the weird hybrid Shoto characters from Street Fighter 4, making something completely unique in Street Fighter 5, which makes me more happy than you can possibly imagine. I've been fairly vocal about how some characters perform in Street Fighter 5 and the first early impressions of them, where I'm not too excited by what they can do, and it's kind of hard to see possibilities beyond what the game is setting up. But just based on the very early impressions of this, I desperately want to play more of this character, and I think you guys are going to like him a lot. I don't know about the future characters. We got to talk a lot more about the changes to existing roster members in Street Fighter 5 going into Season 2, but Akuma going forward in the future versions of Street Fighter 5 is representing something I really wanted to see changed about the game, which is how characters play and how familiar are they to previous characters without removing things. Regardless of how top tier you think he is, Nash was actually a great reimagining of the classic Street Fighter Alpha Guile character into something that is completely different and still a lot of fun to use while still resembling his classic Nash playstyle. Either way, the launch for this character isn't even too far away, just about 15 days out right now, along with a lot of the Season 2 changes happening to the entire roster of Street Fighter 5, so we will be getting a lot more time with this character much sooner than I originally anticipated. As always, guys, I'll be back with more info and updates as soon as possible to Street Fighter 5, talking about the current existing cast and roster balances and the overall focus to how Street Fighter 5 is going to be changing into Season 2, and not even mentioning those damn characters that showed up at the end of the Akuma trailer. Who are they, and do we have some hints as far as what they could be going into the future? As always, guys, thank you a ton for watching. My name is Max, and I'll see you next time.
AKUMA wins.